The story begins with an overweight boy sitting on the floor of a messy room, wondering how he ended up in that situation. Then, a maid enters and introduces herself as Ilsa, saying she has been assigned to serve Prince Ludwig. The boy, shocked, realizes he is reincarnated as the protagonist of an erotic game. The boy remembers that he was reincarnated inside a dark simulation RPG he used to play obsessively in his past life. In this game, Prince Ludwig led a brutal campaign, enslaving women of all races and classes. The game was infamous for its tragic and hopeless endings. Even after defeating all enemies, the protagonist was always executed in the true ending. With a 0 survival rate and multiple endings of defeat, rebellion, or suicide, he realizes he is trapped in a world of pure despair. The boy recognizes Ilsa as one of the main heroines, the daughter of a viscount who, in the game, ended up as Ludwig's slave. Confused, he tries to confirm the date and discovers he is 5 years before the official start of the game's story. Realizing this, he understands he still has time to change his fate before everything falls apart. The boy remembers that, in the original game, the story began with Ilsa already enslaved during the tutorial. Knowing this, he panics at the thought of the tragic endings and decides he must avoid the worst at all costs. With 5 years before the main events, he sees a real chance to change everything. Trying to act differently, he politely dismisses Ilse and thanks her for her work, attempting to distance himself from the game's cruel script. The boy feels uncomfortable trying to act politely toward Ilsa, knowing that a prince would normally not treat a maid this way. He also feels nervous, as he had never spoken to such a beautiful girl in his previous life. Ilse, a little confused by his attitude, formally introduces herself and offers to obey any order, showing complete dedication to her role. The boy asks to be left alone for a while, leaving Ilse confused and worried that she might have done something wrong. He quickly denies it, saying he is actually grateful she accepted serving someone like him. Ilse, still a bit unsure, apologizes and leaves the room, while he feels relieved for managing to avoid any typical scene from the game during their first meeting. When Ludwig was only 13 years old, he was humiliated by his own fiancée, Princess Sophia, who refused to marry someone she called a monster and an orc. Her cruel words left a deep mark on the boy, who until then had been innocent and shy. This moment was one of the main triggers for the distorted personality he would develop in the future. After the public humiliation, Sophia spread rumors saying Ludwig had inherited his father's violent temper and was obsessed with women. The rumors spread, and the emperor, trying to comfort him, gave him a girl as a plaything, someone he could break at will. This only made Ludwig isolate himself further, and it was at that moment, as he took out everything on her, that his personality began to warp completely. While reflecting on everything, the boy feels relieved for not yet following the cruel path of the original Ludwig. He believes he can change the course of the story, as he understands the character's suffering, having gone through something similar in his past life, where he was always an outcast and never had contact with girls. Thinking it over, he concludes that the true villain of the story might be the Emperor, not Ludwig. If he could remove him from the picture, he might be able to rewrite the entire game scenario. He quickly realizes that removing the Emperor from the game would be impossible, as Ludwig depends entirely on his support to avoid being eliminated by the nobles. Discouraged, he looks at himself in the mirror and wonders what he could do. Remembering his father's imposing appearance, the Emperor, he gets an idea. If he could lose weight, perhaps he could look more dignified and change his image. With that, he decides to take the first step toward rewriting his destiny. Determined to change his fate, the boy declares he will lose weight, achieve a more acceptable appearance, avoid being hated by the heroines, and, above all, escape the story's bad ending. He understands he must act differently from the original Ludwig to have a real chance of rewriting everything. Emperor Otto von Balderberg, known for being a tyrant, appears surrounded by beautiful women and asks his son if he liked Ilsa. Embarrassed, Ludwig quickly denies it, thinking she is far too beautiful for someone like him. Despite his cruel reputation, the Emperor is also a doting father who spoils his son, which could end up being an advantage for Ludwig in his attempt to change the story. Ludwig thinks that if Ilsa believes he doesn't like her, it will end her dedication and effort. He recalls that Ilsa's family only agreed to send her to the castle in an attempt to regain their noble status, even if it meant she would be treated as the prince's plaything. The Emperor tells Ludwig not to take Ilsa seriously, as there are better suitors for him, but praises his son for having a more cheerful expression, showing a side of paternal concern. The Emperor promises Ludwig that, in the future, he will ensure vengeance against the kingdoms that humiliated him, vowing retaliation in his son's name. Ludwig is surprised by the excessive protection and realizes how indulgent his father is toward him, unlike everyone else around. The boy remembers that, despite being in the prince's body, the one truly there is him, not the real Ludwig. Suddenly, he feels an intense pain in his head, as if it were being split in two. Alarmed, he calls for help, and Ilse comes running, worried to see the prince unwell. After fainting from the pain, Ludwig wakes up to find Ilse by his side, relieved that he has regained consciousness. He is surprised by her concern and, feeling awkward, asks why she cares so much for him. Ilse replies that she is worried because he is her master, showing loyalty and kindness. The boy realizes that in the game she acted like a faithful servant, but now she is more human and affectionate. He thanks her, saying he is fine, and Ilse comments that Ludwig is very different from what the rumors say, reinforcing the impression that he is managing to change the story's course. After recovering, Ludwig dismisses Ilse so she doesn't have to stay there any longer, and she politely leaves. Alone, he decides to begin his change and starts a workout routine, beginning with squats, even finding it very hard at first. The next morning, Ludwig starts changing his habits. He asks for smaller meals with more vegetables, surprising everyone. Ilse is puzzled by his behavior and asks if he is sick, but Ludwig explains he just wants to lose weight. The news that the prince wants to slim down leaves Ilse completely surprised. After breakfast, Ludwig asks Ilse for help, but she misunderstands and thinks it is some kind of embarrassing request. He quickly explains that he only wants her to help him train and lose weight. Even so, Ludwig feels nervous for having asked such a favor from such a beautiful girl, as he never had the courage to do anything like this in his previous life. Ilse suggests that maybe the Knight Commander would be more suitable to train Ludwig, but he recalls that she is very skilled, coming from a family famous for secret operations and assassinations. Among the heroines, Ilse is known for her speed and quick attacks, making her perfect for training. Determined, Ludwig insists and asks for her help, showing he is truly committed to changing. Ludwig admits that he has always been rejected and insulted by princesses and other kingdoms, and that not even as a prince was he considered worthy of an engagement. He reveals that his greatest wish is to become someone less repulsive, especially to prove to Princess Sophia and everyone else that they were wrong about him. Even knowing he won't change drastically overnight, he just wants to take the first step. Ilse notices his sincerity and agrees to help him on this journey. Now determined, Ilse commits to meeting Ludwig's expectations, no matter what. She accepts the challenge of helping him in his journey, showing she is truly willing to support him. Ludwig asks Ilse not to go easy on him and promises to endure anything during training. Ilse agrees and says she will train him without mercy. From that moment on, she demands Ludwig call her instructor, showing that training has now become serious and she will push him hard. Ilse takes on the role of a strict instructor and says Ludwig can only respond with yes or yes ma'am. She points to the garden as the first training ground and begins without wasting any time, leaving Ludwig a bit intimidated but ready to start his transformation. Ilse explains that Ludwig's excess fat has been accumulating for years and that exercise and diet alone won't be enough to change his body so quickly. That's why she will use a special body modification technique passed down by the Hildebrandt family, assuring him he can trust her for this new challenge. Ludwig declares himself fully willing to do whatever it takes to lose weight and change his life. Without much explanation, Ilse says the first step will be to jump off the balcony where they are. He panics, but she orders him to follow without question, showing that training won't be easy. Ludwig is surprised when he lands without injury, thinking the fat cushioned the fall. Calmly, Ilse says everything is fine and orders him to go back up and repeat the process several times, showing that the training will be intense and without rest. Ilse reinforces that Ludwig can only respond with yes or yes ma'am, maintaining her strict instructor demeanor. Ludwig, already exhausted and almost in tears, obeys and keeps climbing and jumping from the balcony under her orders, while she encourages him to repeat everything without pause. After so much effort, Ilse massages Ludwig to care for his body, explaining that this is essential for recovery. Ludwig feels flustered by the closeness, but Ilse keeps a professional tone, saying it was a role assigned by the Emperor and asking if he no longer wants that kind of comfort. Nervously, he replies that he doesn't expect anything like that, making it clear he is not used to receiving such attention. Ludwig thanks her for the massage and tells her not to worry, saying it's something done out of care and not obligation. Ilse asks him to call her by her name since they are no longer training, lightening the atmosphere between them. Ludwig agrees and promises to keep working hard the next day, while Ilse accepts, showing she is excited to help him on this journey. 6 months later, Ludwig's body is much leaner, though his weight hasn't dropped much. Ilse explains that the training has compressed his fat, changing his appearance. Now, they will increase the challenge even more by training from the third-floor balcony, showing Ludwig is truly determined to keep improving. Tired, Ludwig asks if he will ever be able to walk on walls like Ilse does. She replies that he has no aptitude for that, but reassures him that he has other, even greater talents. Ilse informs him that in 3 months, they will move on to a new training stage, surprising Ludwig with the intensity of the plan. A few months later, in winter, Ilse takes Ludwig to train dodging attacks using a kelpie, a monster from the early game quest. Ludwig is startled by the challenge, but Ilse explains that he needs to learn how to dodge, since running in a straight line won't work. If he fails, it won't be serious. Only his pride will be at risk, so the training becomes more fun, even if it leaves Ludwig desperate with its difficulty. Ludwig is thrown into the water and has to dodge the kelpie's attacks, taking several hits right away. Ilse encourages him to keep trying until he can dodge perfectly. Even tired and desperate, Ludwig promises to keep working hard, showing he's determined to improve, while Ilse watches, excited about his progress. After pushing himself through training, Ludwig receives praise from Ilse for a job well done. He thanks her, but when leaving the pool, he slips and takes another fall. Ilse watches in surprise as Ludwig tumbles again, showing that challenges continue even without monsters involved. During wooden sword training, Ilse observes Ludwig and says that fighting style doesn't suit him. She suggests he use a sword and shield, believing it would fit his abilities better. Ludwig, determined, says he won't give up, even knowing he should listen to his instructor's advice. Ludwig insists on training with 2 swords because he's always thought that style looked cooler, remembering the games he used to play. Ilse notices that his goal has changed, but agrees and promises to train him until he's truly skilled with that style, even if she finds it unusual. Ilse warns that training will now be 3 times more intense than before. Ludwig is startled, but she gives no respite and begins the new training phase, making him jump from the 5th floor and practice even more with the swords, showing the challenge has become much tougher. After a year of intense training, Ludwig finally masters most of the techniques and transforms his body, becoming much leaner and stronger. Ilse praises his progress, saying her role as instructor is complete. Ludwig admits he's still not perfect with 2 swords, but is proud of how much he's grown in so little time. Ludwig remembers that, in the beginning, he wanted to distance himself from Ilse to avoid trouble, but after a year together, he realizes she's become very important to him. He asks to keep receiving her guidance and suggests she call him Louis, saying he'd like them to be closer. Ilse agrees, lightening the mood and showing they've built a strong bond over this time. Ludwig says he's counting on Ilse, making it clear he trusts her. Ilse responds formally, saying she'll call him Prince Ludwig from now on, and promises to do her best to serve him. A few days later, an elegant ball begins, showing they're closer and now attending the castle's important events together. Ludwig notices he's drawing a lot of attention at the ball because of his new body. He thinks about moving to a quieter corner, since people always avoided him before. Ilse approaches and reminds him the party is in his honor, asking if he's really going to isolate himself. She tells him to stop intimidating others with his closed-off attitude, showing she's concerned about his public image. The Emperor congratulates Ludwig on his transformation, saying he has truly changed. Ludwig thanks his father, who asks him to make the family name known at the academy since many important families attend there. The Emperor says the palace will miss Ludwig but orders Ilse to support the prince day and night, showing he trusts her. Ilse accepts the order, and Ludwig realizes everyone in the hall now respects him. Ludwig apologizes to Ilse, but she says serving him is natural and that dedication is expected of her. The Emperor wishes them both good luck, while Ludwig thinks he never asked her to say such things, but still feels pleased. He remembers Ilse's 2 years older, so being classmates might be strange, but he accepts it. Ludwig says they should keep working together at the academy, and Ilse promises to serve him both as a classmate and as his maid. On the entrance ceremony day, Ludwig looks in the mirror and sees how much he's changed in a year, remembering he once looked like an orc. He thinks it's no wonder Sophia didn't want to marry a monster like him. Even so, he finds it unlikely she would attend the same academy after ruining diplomatic relations. Meanwhile, Sophia appears, thinking the academy accepts royalty and nobles from other countries, but doubts she herself would end up there. Ludwig is surprised to see Ilse ready in her academy uniform, feeling flustered in front of her. He tries to hide it, but she notices the atmosphere. He awkwardly says she looks beautiful, while Ilse thanks him with a light laugh. In the end, he comments that this is good enough for now, showing he's genuinely charmed. Ludwig heads to school and talks with Ilse about his speech as student representative. He says it's perfect, but inside he's nervous about speaking in front of everyone. Ilse encourages him, saying no one would be better for the role than him, which makes Ludwig determined to give his best to avoid a bad ending. Ludwig arrives at the Imperial Academy with Ilse. Some comment that his behavior could be a bad example, but he says he's used to being mocked and called an orc. Even so, he stays confident and offers his hand for Ilse to enter first. Ludwig notices everyone looking at him as he walks hand in hand with Ilse, feeling nervous and thinking they must be wondering what an ugly guy like him is doing with such a beautiful girl. He tries to hide his embarrassment but ends up letting out an accidental oink, startling even Sophia, who was nearby. To escape the situation, he quickly urges Ilse to head to the entrance ceremony. Ludwig is shocked to see Sophia there, thinking it would be impossible for her to study at the academy due to diplomatic problems. He gets nervous, imagining that if the Emperor found out, it could cause political trouble. Sophia approaches, asks if he's hurt, and offers her hand to help, leaving Ludwig even more surprised and unsure how to react. Ludwig notices Sophia's attitude toward him has changed compared to 2 years ago. Now she's much kinder and more polite. They exchange thanks, but Ludwig quickly gets nervous, apologizes, and leaves with Ilse, saying they're in a hurry, leaving Sophia surprised. Ilse, irritated, asks who the girl was, but Ludwig tells her to calm down. He realizes Princess Sophia didn't recognize him as Ludwig and tries to brush it off, saying it's fine. Even so, he remembers the harsh words he once heard about being a horrible monster like an orc, but now starts to think he might have really changed for the better, even if the pain of the past still lingers. Feeling the weight of everything he's been through, Ludwig throws himself into Ilse's arms and starts crying, unable to hold back his emotions. Ilse hugs him back, telling him not to keep anything inside and to let it all out, showing she's truly there to support him. Ludwig tries to hide it, saying he doesn't need anyone crying for him, but Ilse, even emotional, says she's not crying. She hugs him tighter until Ludwig realizes it and awkwardly apologizes because she squeezed him so much he couldn't breathe. The headmaster finishes his speech and tells everyone to give their best. Then, Eleonora, daughter of the Empire's most powerful ducal family and one of the game's heroines, steps on stage to welcome the new students. Watching her, Ludwig remembers her route is dangerous. If not handled properly, it ends with a coup and the rebellion ending, so he knows he must be careful not to make mistakes with her. Eleonora ends her speech saying she looks forward to studying with everyone. Soon after, Ludwig is called to give his speech as the new student's representative. He is visibly nervous, but receives Ilse's support before walking to the stage, with everyone in the audience watching his every step. Ludwig begins his speech by introducing himself as the horrible orc, and says he understands why many there dislike him. He explains that most only know the rumors about him, mainly spread by Sophia, and that few have actually spoken to him or know who he really is. He closes by saying he hopes everyone will get to know him for who he is during their time at the academy. He asks that they judge for themselves whether he really is the monster from the rumors. Even with strange looks from others, he finishes his speech a bit nervous, but determined to change people's opinions on his own. Ludwig walks confidently, with several important girls from the story in the background, including Ilse, Sophia, and Eleonora. He thinks he must do everything possible to avoid the bad ending. This page closes the Academy entrance arc, showing his main goal now is to change his fate and avoid the game's bad ending. Episode 3 begins with Ilse praising Ludwig's speech sarcastically, saying the students must have misheard since no one reacted. He then decides he needs to fit in with the other students and starts socializing on the very first day, heading to class with the group. On the way to class with Ilse, Ludwig is suddenly shoved by a knight who rudely tells him to move. Ludwig and Ilse think his attitude is over the top, and Ilse even holds Ludwig back to avoid trouble. A long-haired girl who seems to be an important noble laughs at the situation and apologizes for her knight's rudeness. Ludwig is surprised to see Natalia Silvestri, one of the protagonists and saint of the Minerva Church from the Holy Kingdom of Lathia. He remembers that in the game, she is one of the most treacherous characters, known for manipulating and inciting hostility against the Baldoberg Empire. She even destroys a neighboring kingdom and forms an anti-Baldoberg alliance, becoming a major threat in the ugly orc revolt. Ludwig politely introduces himself as Prince, while Natalia apologizes for the delay and introduces herself as a saint of the Minerva Church, accompanied by her knights, Batista and Marco. Natalia compliments Ludwig, saying he doesn't look like the rumors, then teases him by calling him a dreamer. Ludwig instantly picks up on her sarcasm and thinks it's typical of one of the strongest heroines. Ludwig notes Natalia's beauty, her silver hair, blue eyes, and fair skin, The knights interrupt the conversation, saying they need to head to class. Ludwig and Ilse are quickly called and leave in a hurry, while Natalia politely says goodbye. Ilse seems a bit bothered, already sensing the tension. Ilse asks if Ludwig is interested in the saint, but he immediately says that's impossible. He thinks he must keep his distance from Natalia because she's so provocative. It's almost like she's a succubus rather than a saint. Ludwig reassures Ilse that he would never open his heart to anyone but her, and insists he has no interest in the saint. Professor Matilda introduces herself to the class, and Ludwig notices she looks a lot like a secondary character from the game. Meanwhile, he sees there are two other heroines in the room besides Ilse. Ludwig thinks at least Sophia isn't there. Natalia waves at Ludwig, leaving him confused, and Ilse considers whether she needs to step in, but someone stops her, telling her not to resort to violence so quickly. Ludwig realizes the other heroine in the class is Ophelia de Brynn, the fourth princess of the United Kingdom of Brynn. She only appears in the second half of the game and is known as the Frenzied Knight Princess, famous for her high attack power, second only to the final boss. She's a key piece in the game's strategies, but Ludwig thinks that, unlike the game, he can't even consider pursuing her route now, since real life has no easy shortcuts. Ludwig is determined to avoid a bad ending and become the next emperor, promising to restore Ophelia's family if he succeeds. He also commits to ensuring Ilse's happiness, no matter what. He apologizes for Ilse having to serve him even as a student, but she responds emotionally that serving the prince is a privilege she would never give up. Ilse hands Ludwig a formal invitation from Eleonora, inviting him to the freshman's welcome ball. He learns it's a tradition for royal family members to attend such events at the Imperial Academy, so there's no way to avoid it. Eleonora, who has plans to overthrow the Empire, probably has some hidden motive behind the ball, but Ludwig accepts to attend anyway. Ludwig worries because he's never danced before, but Ilse quickly reassures him, saying she'll be his dance partner all night. Even though he thinks she might prefer another partner, she makes it clear she only wants to be by his side, leaving him a bit flustered but relieved. Ludwig enters the hall and feels like he doesn't belong. Hearing people whispering, he notices Ilse stands out more beautiful and elegant than anyone else there, drawing attention everywhere she goes. Ludwig feels insecure, thinking maybe he shouldn't have come to the ball, but Ilse cheers him up, saying everyone has been waiting for his presence since he's the Empire's highlight. Embarrassed, Ludwig feels a bit happier with her words. Soon after, Eleonora thanks everyone for coming and asks them to enjoy the night. Ludwig notices no one has started dancing yet because they're all waiting for him as the prince. Ilse explains that, as the heir, no one dares go first. He gets a little nervous, but Ilse holds out her hand and invites him to open the ball with her, and he accepts, excited. Ludwig feels nervous while dancing with Ilse, afraid of stepping on her foot, but she calms him down, saying he's doing very well. She asks him to look at her, explaining that the proper thing is to face your partner while dancing, making Ludwig more comfortable. Ludwig feels embarrassed while dancing, sensing he's looking at Ilse in a special way. He feels guilty, but Ilse notices and simply smiles, holding his hand. Ludwig comments that he's already danced a lot, but Ilse says there will be other opportunities to dance after that night. Ludwig pauses to rest and thinks there are more suitable men for Ilse than him. While drinking wine, Sophia appears smiling and asks to dance with him. Ludwig becomes nervous and feels his body tremble at her request. Ludwig remembers everything Sophia did against him in the past, spreading lies and insulting him as a horrible orc to other countries. Even so, now she's inviting him to dance. Ludwig wants to refuse, but freezes up from the trauma and memories, unable to react while Sophia already calls him for the next song. Ilse steps forward and firmly says that tonight, only she will dance with Prince Ludwig. She introduces herself as his attendant, but makes it clear that she won't let anyone else get close. Sophia tries to belittle Ilse, saying it's inappropriate for a mere attendant to want to dance with a prince. But Ilse doesn't lower her head and stands firm, clearly angry and determined to protect Ludwig. Sophia starts by saying she also feels pain for everything Ludwig went through because of cruel comments, but quickly changes her tone. She looks at Ilse with contempt and says, Ilse is nothing more than a fallen noble, the daughter of a ruined family, and is only there as the prince's plaything. Ilse becomes serious, but Sophia grows agitated and shouts, making it clear she does not accept Ilse's presence there. Ludwig loses his patience and snaps back at Sophia in front of everyone. He admits that in the past he really was seen as an ugly orc, but remembers that Ilse always stayed by his side, supporting him when no one else would. Ludwig defends Ilse, telling Sophia not to compare her with people who only judge by appearance and spread rumors. Eleonora interrupts the commotion, calling Ludwig's attention and saying that's enough. She states she saw everything. Ludwig spilled a drink on Sophia and even yelled at her. Eleonora reminds him that leaders are responsible for controlling the behavior of their allies, and in this case, it was Ludwig's own attendant who insulted Sophia in front of everyone. Ludwig remembers what he said at the ceremony, that he wanted everyone to see his true self. He emphasizes that he can't stay quiet when someone important to him is insulted because of him, showing that this is the real Ludwig. In the end, Ludwig wonders how he will avoid the bad ending if he can't even protect the person who needs him most at that moment. Ludwig says he doesn't care if people were disappointed to see who he really is. He says he wants nothing to do with those who use status to insult others or those who accept such people. After that, he calls Ilse to leave with him, thinking there's no turning back now. Ludwig and Ilse keep apologizing to each other, but he says she didn't do anything wrong. Ilse says that in fact she's happy because he defended her, even against Princess Sophia. They realize they're apologizing for nothing and end up laughing together, the mood lightening after that moment. Ludwig thanks Ilse for everything she's done for him and says he's also been protected by her. Ilse becomes emotional, thanks him back, and admits she's always cared for him warmly. They agree that now they're even and promise to keep relying on each other from now on. Ludwig realizes that his plan to distance himself from the heroines and avoid bad endings won't work. He wanted to slowly change the girl's image of him, but all others saw was him throwing juice and shouting at someone. Now, he feels he's even more branded as the horrible orc, even while trying to show he was different from the villainous protagonist they thought he was. Ludwig thinks that even if he tries to explain he's not the horrible orc, no one would believe him now. But he doesn't regret what he did. He realizes that each heroine has a different bad ending, so he'll have to deal with each one separately. Even with Sophia being one of the heroines and knowing they'd never get along, he decides that the best thing is to do whatever it takes to survive, moving forward however he can. Ludwig is surprised to receive a late-night visit and finds Ilse at his door, wearing a transparent nightgown that looks like a special item. She's a bit embarrassed and asks to come in. Flustered, Ludwig quickly lets her in. Ilse says she wanted to properly thank him for what happened at the ball, even though Ludwig says they're already even. He's curious why she came so late. Ilse approaches Ludwig, hugs him, and says this is the only way she can repay him for what he did. Nervously, she says it's her first time and asks him to accept her however he wants. Ludwig is very surprised, says he did nothing to deserve that, notices she's trembling, and tries to explain it's not a lack of desire, he just doesn't know what to do. Ludwig refuses Ilse's offer, telling her she shouldn't give her body just out of gratitude, but instead save it for someone she truly loves. He tells her to treasure that moment, showing he cares about her. Ilse becomes thoughtful but ends up asking to at least sleep beside him that night. Ludwig suggests she should rest since it's late. Awkwardly, Ludwig tells Ilse to use the bed while he sleeps on the couch, but she refuses and insists he should sleep properly. In the end, Ilse throws herself onto the bed with Ludwig, telling him to sleep together like that. Ludwig is completely speechless but accepts, embarrassed. Ilse smiles and confesses it's her first time sleeping with a man, making Ludwig even more nervous. They lie together, with Ilse hugging Ludwig, while he wonders if he'll be able to handle the night beside her, blushing. Ludwig wakes up, still embraced by Ilse, and thinks he should get up, but chooses to enjoy the moment a bit longer. Ilse wakes up, smiling, greets him with a good morning, making him flustered. They're both embarrassed but happy to have spent the night together. Ludwig realizes Ilse stayed awake watching him all night because she was too happy to sleep. He says he needs to follow his routine and get up, but Ilse hugs him tightly, saying she's happy. Ludwig tells her to rest and leaves quickly, flustered. Even without sleeping at all, Ludwig is full of energy and decides to train early. He thinks he's already lost a lot of weight, but fears returning to how he was before and being rejected even by Ilse. Meanwhile, Sophia trains hard with the sword, and Ludwig tries to focus on his training for the day, but feels a bit insecure seeing her. Ludwig apologizes for bothering Princess Ophelia in the courtyard, but she tells him not to worry. Curious, she asks how he knows her name, and he replies that they're classmates, and that she's known as royalty from the United Kingdom of Bryn. He fears it might seem like he's been watching her, but is relieved when he notices she didn't take it the wrong way. Ludwig meets Ophelia in the courtyard early in the morning and asks what brought her there. Surprised and nervous, he tries to refuse, remembering her reputation as the frenzied night princess and wanting to avoid getting involved. Smiling, Ophelia invites Ludwig to start training. He's nervous but accepts, thinking about how incredibly cute she is. As he prepares, Ludwig shows concentration, and Ophelia, with a determined look, launches a powerful strike, showing her strength right away. Half an hour later, Ludwig notices Ophelia has been watching his entire training session without doing her own. Curious, she asks if he always trains like that, and he confirms, explaining he climbs walls and jumps off rooftops. Ophelia finds it insane, but different from what she's heard in the rumors. Ludwig remembers Ilsa reacted the same way when she first saw him training. Ophelia comments that she still doesn't know much about Ludwig, but has heard the rumors about the horrible orc. At that moment, Ilsa silently appears behind him, startling him. Ludwig remembers an important detail from the game. If Ilsa's loyalty reaches 200%, along with another heroine's at 100%, it triggers the assassination ending. Ludwig realizes Ilsa is fully in yandere mode, and remembers that in the game's guide, the ending conditions were explained, but not who the culprit was. He can't understand how her loyalty increased so much, and becomes alarmed. Ophelia recognizes Ilsa as Ludwig's attendant, but Ilsa, with a dark look and no light in her eyes, coldly asks why he's with the princess. Ophelia remarks that Ilsa must feel lucky to serve a master like Ludwig, and Ilsa replies that it's an honor. Confused, Ludwig asks what she means, and Ophelia explains that due to his bad reputation and the previous night's behavior, if an attendant disrespected foreign royalty, execution wouldn't be unlikely. This makes Ludwig realize that Ophelia was also present at the ball. Ludwig thinks that if Ophelia was at the ball as royalty, she surely wouldn't have approved of his action. However, she surprises him by saying she found it interesting how he protected his attendant's dignity, even if it made him more despised. Ophelia then says goodbye, leaving Ludwig surprised and Ilsa with a shiver down her spine. Ludwig reflects, astonished, that the first person at the Imperial Academy to show interest in him was Ophelia, the fierce knight princess. Still processing her words, he's called by Ilsa for training. However, she decides to double the intensity of the routine, leaving Ludwig panicked and fearing he won't survive before the main story even begins. Before entering the classroom, Ilsa stops Ludwig to fix his uniform collar, moving close to him in a gentle way, making him flustered from her scent. She finishes the adjustment and he thanks her, still embarrassed. Then, they enter the classroom together, drawing attention from other students. Ludwig is surprised to see Natalia there and questions why she's present. She asks, since when he and Ophelia have become so close, leaving him even more confused. Meanwhile, the knight Batista gives Ludwig a threatening glare, while Marco, the other holy knight, is busy flirting with some girls. Ophelia casually puts her arm around Ludwig and states they trained together, shocking him further. Natalia reacts enthusiastically to the idea of Ophelia and Ludwig training together, saying she'd love to join someday, but explains her mornings are dedicated to praying to Lady Minerva. Ludwig tries to downplay the situation, saying they just happen to be in the same place, but notices Ilsa's dark gaze returning, which scares him. In his thoughts, he remarks that while Natalia's excuse sounds noble, he knows full well she enjoys something completely different. Ludwig is surprised to see Ophelia and Natalia in the same room, mentally calling them the frenzied knight princess and the cunning saint. Natalia explains that despite appearances, she was trained in staff combat since Lady Minerva is not only the goddess of prosperity, but also of war. Ophelia shows interest, while Ludwig laments not ending up in a class with other heroines except Sophia. Natalia and Ophelia think it's bad luck to deal with him, while Ludwig sarcastically calls the teacher hardworking, and the professor asks everyone to sit down. Louis finally relaxes, but is interrupted by Ilsa, who coldly tells him that starting tomorrow, training in the courtyard is forbidden. He tries to respond, confused, but she demands he say, "Yes, ma'am." Frightened, Louis obeys, thinking the bad ending is approaching before the main story even starts. During training, Ilsa gives Louis modified practice swords, much heavier than normal, to improve his dual-blade combat. At first he could barely lift them, but with constant effort he can now handle them with ease. After an intense count, he completes 1,000 strikes, proud to have finally mastered the dual sword style. Louis remembers spending an entire year training with Ilsa, extremely difficult, but now looks back on it with some nostalgia, though he wouldn't want to repeat it. During a night training session, he's surprised by Ophelia, who appears praising his dedication. She explains she came for her own training and had a feeling she'd find him there. Nervous, Louis fears Ilsa will find out and scold him, silently wishing Ophelia would leave. During training, Ophelia explains that even though she prefers fighting one-handed, The most important thing is the fundamentals, and in training, one must hold the sword with both hands. She approaches and adjusts Louis' stance, correcting his distance. The sudden closeness makes him nervous and distracted, while she insists he stay focused and clear his mind. Louis reflects that the situation feels like a typical Eroge game scenario, since the unexpected proximity leaves him confused. The girl asks if he doesn't have a girlfriend and suggests that since they're training together, they should have a sparring match. He accepts, but thinks about not overburdening Ilsa more than necessary, preferring to rest after training. Ludwig apologizes, saying the skill gap between him and Princess Ophelia is too big and that she overestimates him. Ophelia, however, imagines that a strict trainer like him would make for a good fight. Still, Ludwig immediately refuses, stating he would never accept fighting her. Ophelia finds it a pity and concludes that rumors really aren't reliable. Ophelia comments that, unlike the rumors, Ludwig shows thoughtfulness in his words, posture, and dedication to training. She recalls having seen that expression before, during a battle against the Bristic United Kingdom, when she was captured and proudly declared that even in defeat, they fought with all their strength and had no regrets. Ludwig thanks Ophelia for her words, thinking that in both the game and reality, she remains the fearless warrior he knows. She says that if she can't fight him, she'll find another way to test his skills. When asked, she dodges the question and tells him to focus on training, reminding him that if they keep up the pace, the night will pass quickly. As they walk, Ilsa suggests stopping at a stand that sells frappe, a popular drink in the imperial capital. Ludwig is surprised to find something like that in this world, remembering that in his past life, he'd only seen it on television. Excited by the recommendation, he decides to try it, which pleases Ilse. Ludwig arrives in the imperial capital and is impressed by the bustling main street. He asks if Ilsa has been there before, and she explains her family lives in the city's outskirts. Ludwig comments that with his old body, he couldn't leave the palace, and that after Ilse arrived, they were too busy. Observing the square full of food stalls, he wonders if a festival is taking place. After school, Ludwig walks alongside Ilse, thinking about what to do. Glancing to the side, he sees someone who catches his attention but hides it when Ilse asks. He wonders if he should take a day off, and Ilse smiles, saying that in that case, she already has something in mind. During lunch, a classmate asks Ludwig if he really plans to duel Princess Ophelia. He quickly denies it and, feeling a bit nervous, asks Ilse to help him avoid her for the next 2 days. She agrees with a cheerful smile. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure watches from a distance, and Ludwig feels relieved, thinking that, at least for now, he has managed to avoid the tragic ending where he would be assassinated. Ophelia states that crossing swords is the best way to truly know someone, and says she wants to understand more about Ludwig. She looks at him seriously, calling him by the nickname Horrendous Ogre, and saying she wants to see his true face. After that, she confidently says goodbye and leaves, while Ludwig just waves awkwardly, confused and uneasy. Ophelia insists that she can satisfy him, but Ludwig panics and refuses, thinking that combining a battle maniac with an assassin is a terrible idea. He tries to escape by saying Ilse is busy and can't participate, but Ophelia then suggests that he himself be her opponent. Ludwig makes up an excuse about having important things to do after school, and she, pitying him, asks if he will be free the next day. With no way to refuse, he reluctantly agrees. Ophelia warns that her plans might change, but agrees to the proposal, leaving Ludwig uncomfortable. Ilse asks why she is so obsessed with fighting, and Ludwig thinks it's because she's a battle maniac. Confidently, Ophelia answers that she wants to face strong opponents, which to her is reason enough, while Ludwig is surprised by the simplicity of her logic. After managing to get away from Ophelia, Ludwig runs into Natalia, known as the Black-Hearted Saint. Surprised and a little nervous, he tries to hide his discomfort with a formal greeting, while Natalia greets him with a smile and a provocative tone. Natalia approaches Ludwig suggestively, asking if he was about to have something from the nearby stall. Ilse steps in, saying Ludwig was going to have a frappe with her, and mentions the place is famous for the drink. Smiling, Natalia decides to join them, leaving Ludwig surprised and speechless. Ilse cuts Natalia off, remarking that with Lord Batista and Sir Marco around, she seemed to be in a hurry. Natalia tries to argue that a stronger bond between Crown Prince Ludwig and the church's saint would be beneficial, suggesting that this should take priority. Ilse questions how having a frappe with the prince aligns with the teachings of Lord Minerva. Natalia replies that strengthening ties with the future emperor is natural to maintain peace between the Western nations and the church. She is already planning ahead, preparing for the possibility of war. Ludwig acknowledges that Natalia isn't wrong, but says she overestimates him. He admits to being the crown prince of the Balderberg Empire, but that doesn't guarantee he will become emperor. In the game, The Revenge of the Horrible Orc, he always remains a prince, regardless of the route, and all endings lead to his downfall. Ilse stares at Ludwig and, despite his hesitation, agrees to have frappés with Natalia. The three place their orders, and Ilse comments that it's natural for the future emperor to build political ties with the holy saint of Minerva's church. Ludwig realizes this is her true intention. Ludwig thinks Ilse believes that if he doesn't become emperor, her goal of restoring the Hildebrand family will never be achieved. He promises that even if he never ascends the throne, he will restore her family's honor, seeing it as a way to repay her for giving him a second chance at life. Ilse, slightly embarrassed, says that's not exactly what she meant. While thinking about his order, Ludwig chooses a specific frappé. The attendant quickly prepares and hands him the drink, but he's surprised to see there are 2 straws in the same cup, realizing this means sharing it with someone, which makes him nervous. Ludwig asks if it wouldn't be better for each of them to have their own frappé, but Ilse refuses, saying the drink is meant to be shared between 2 people. He hesitates, even offering to swap for hers, but she declines and insists they drink together while it's still cold, leaving Ludwig flustered. As they drink the frappé together, Ludwig notices Ilse seems to swallow tensely and wonders if she's nervous too. They sit very close, exchanging shy glances while sharing the drink. Ludwig and Ilse continue drinking the frappé together, praising its sweet, cold flavor. Ilse remarks that hers is also delicious, while Natalia tries to offer her own frappé to him, suggesting indirect contact. Ludwig politely refuses, but she insists. In the end, Natalia notices that Lord Batista is already satisfied with his, and with a disappointed air, says it's a shame. Natalia says goodbye, noting that she'll see everyone in class the next day, but that this is enough for today. Ludwig, recalling her demeanor at the entrance ceremony, is certain she dislikes him. With the group gone, he and Ilse are left alone, and she confirms it's now just the 2 of them. Ludwig thinks that, for Ilse, this is probably just part of her job as his assistant, but for him, it feels more like a date. As he reflects on this, he ends up making Ilse visibly embarrassed. After finishing the frappés, Ilse decides it's time to head back, so they won't disrupt evening training, and pulls Ludwig by the hand. He thinks a date only ends when you take the person home safely, and, smiling, comments that he'd like to have frappés together again next time. Meanwhile, he wishes Ilse would also see this moment as a date. A week later, Ludwig is exhausted from training, which has become harsher since Ophelia got involved, making Ilse more strict. He remarks on how well she endures it, and she replies that she has been training since childhood. Suddenly, Ludwig spots a man beside Sophia and recognizes him as someone who spoke to Ophelia the previous week, suspecting he has been spreading lies about him. Ludwig thinks that if possible, he would rather not run into Sophia, but avoiding her now would seem like admitting defeat to the woman who insulted him. Determined, he walks past her, and the man accompanying her, without Sophia saying a word. He and Ilse keep walking while Sophia simply continues on her way. As they head toward the cafeteria, Ludwig and Ilse find a group blocking their path. He realizes these people clearly dislike him but feels the situation is excessive. Ilse asks for permission to eliminate the pests, surprising Ludwig, who quickly stops her. Ludwig questions the group about blocking their way and preventing them from having lunch. One of the students insults him, saying he has no right to sit at their table. He recognizes it as mere pack mentality without any real reason, comparing it to a witch hunt on social media, where anonymity makes people more aggressive. Ludwig calls the group pathetic, not realizing he said it out loud. One of the guys, irritated, lunges at him, and Ludwig grabs him, heightening the tension as Ophelia watches with a confident smile. One of the boys accuses Ludwig of trying to dishonor Princess Sophia on the night of the ball, saying he saw and heard everything. Shocked and nervous, Ludwig insists he hasn't seen her since that day, and that there must be some mistake. Remembering Thomas, Sophia's attendant, he realizes Thomas spread this rumor, claiming he would have stopped something terrible if he hadn't noticed in time. Ludwig realizes Thomas approached Ophelia the previous week solely to set up this trap. He says he doesn't know Thomas and swears he did nothing he's being accused of, recalling that he was with Ilse until morning that night. Even so, others start whispering that Ilse is just a toy for the repulsive orc, fueling the rumors further. Ludwig insists he never touched Ilse, and that they were simply together that night, nothing more. Ophelia, however, decides to settle the matter by challenging him with her sword to prove the truth. He tries to argue that a fair duel wouldn't be possible since she knows his dual sword technique, but the situation escalates. Ophelia provokes him, saying that if Ludwig refuses to fight, it will be like admitting guilt, even allowing Ilse to fight alongside him. Angered by the taunts and the insult toward Ilse, Ludwig accepts Ophelia's challenge, determined to defend her honor as well as his own. Fueled by anger, Ludwig shouts that Ophelia will apologize no matter what. From a distance, she meets his gaze with a confident, provocative smile, making it clear she's ready for the fight. Ludwig accepts Ophelia's challenge, promising to make her apologize for insulting Ilse. She schedules the duel for after class. In the training grounds, later Ludwig prepares, unveiling a custom-made weapon obtained through all his privileges as Crown Prince, declaring that it's time to wield his blade. Ludwig reveals his personal weapon, the twin blade Sakura, saying he couldn't refuse the challenge because Ilse's honor would be stained. Determined, he declares that he doesn't intend to lose to Princess Ophelia. With a resolute look, Ludwig tells Ilse they will win together. At the training grounds, he arrives with her, drawing the attention of the spectators. Ophelia acknowledges that at least he had the courage to show up and not run from the challenge. A large crowd gathers to watch the duel, making Ludwig uneasy with the attention. Ophelia notices he wields two swords and praises him, saying someone who lives for battle could never ignore a fine blade. Ophelia prepares to fight, exuding an intimidating presence. Worried, Ilse asks Ludwig not to overexert himself. Ophelia praises Ludwig's determination and charges at full strength. She raises her sword and brings down a powerful strike, starting the confrontation with intensity. Ludwig blocks Ophelia's attack with his two swords, creating a strong impact. He quickly retreats, sliding back to gain distance and prepare his next move. Ludwig feels the devastating force of Ophelia's strike, impressed by her strength. Surprised, Ophelia admits she didn't expect him to block her full-power attack. Despite his fear, he smiles nervously, saying he's also surprised by the outcome. Ludwig feels his hands trembling and his arms numb from the last blow. Still, he holds his stance and faces Ophelia, who charges again at full force, their blades clashing once more with intensity. Ophelia swings her sword with absurd strength, as if it were light, while Ludwig barely manages to keep up. The impact of her blows is so intense he compares it to facing a solid block of iron, imagining her strength comes from brutal training. Ophelia wields her sword as if it were a simple branch, but each strike carries crushing power. Ludwig feels as if he's clashing against a massive block of iron, imagining this strength comes from insane training, where she throws her own body against the ground. Even with his body screaming in pain, Ludwig pretends to be full of energy, provoking Ophelia. Excited by the challenge, she wields her sword, Caliph WLch, and prepares a devastating blow, promising to cut through anything in her path with all her might. Ophelia leaps and unleashes a devastating move called Stormbreaker, creating a massive vortex of force. Ludwig tries to resist but is pushed back by the intense pressure of the attack. After using Stormbreaker, Ophelia is momentarily vulnerable, unable to act for 2 turns. Ludwig spots the opening and quickly moves to take advantage before she can recover. Ludwig takes advantage of the opening Ophelia left and attacks, managing to disarm her. His ally then pins her to the ground, declaring their team the winner. After the fight, Ludwig receives healing magic and is surprised by its effect. He looks at the caster, Saint Natalia, and asks why she helped him, while she smiles and asks how he's feeling. Natalia says she just happened to be nearby and accepts Ludwig's thanks with a smile. She tries to change the subject, but suddenly another girl appears and grabs him, leaving him surprised and confused by the situation. The girl runs up to Ludwig to see if he's all right, and he explains that Saint Natalia healed him. The knight, irritated, realizes this was all part of a plan. Ludwig thinks that if he had attacked recklessly, he would have been defeated in a single strike. The situation begins to feel like an unfair 2-on-1 fight. Ludwig explains that he only focused on defending until he created an opening for Ilse to strike at the right moment, recalling that Ophelia herself allowed a 2-on-1 fight. Meanwhile, some spectators start criticizing, saying this tactic seemed unfair and dishonorable for a duel against the princess. Ophelia interrupts the criticism, reminding them that she herself allowed the 2-on-1 fight from the start, and that Ludwig fought within the rules, winning fairly. She scolds those who tried to interfere, saying there was no room for meddling in the duel. Even so, she comments that the fight was ruined by the confusion, but still praises Ludwig and Ilse for their performance. After the duel, Ophelia bows in apology and says she hopes she can be forgiven. The response is to not worry, which Ludwig interprets as partial acceptance of the apology. Ophelia admits that even without the 2-on-1 setup, she might have lost, and because he endured her strike, she believes in the sincerity of his words. However, she warns that the rest of the crowd may not feel the same way. Meanwhile, Ludwig reflects that from the start, the hostility toward him stemmed only from personal dislike. A girl knocks a boy to the ground with a swift kick. Watching from a distance, it's identified that he is Thomas, Sophia's attendant. She confronts him, reminding him that he recently claimed Prince Ludwig tried to dishonor Princess Sophia on the night of the ball. Pressed to repeat the accusation, Thomas hesitates and begins to stammer, unable to answer firmly. Ophelia glares coldly at Thomas, asking if he dared lie to her. Desperate, he denies it, trying to justify himself. Sophia intervenes, calling to Ophelia, but the Princess of Brynn expresses her disdain, saying the whole situation is shameful. Even after the duel, Thomas continues riling up the crowd and provoking Guy. Sophia then coldly asks if there's anything Ophelia needs. Sophia declares that Thomas has shamed the kingdom and suggests execution would be fitting. Without hesitation, Ophelia says to proceed and cut off his head right there. Shocked, Thomas tries to defend himself, saying he did everything for her. But Sophia stares at him coldly, asking if it was truly for her. Ophelia suggests Thomas's punishment be decided by Ludwig, since he and Ilsa were the ones truly insulted. Ludwig stares at Thomas and states that his behavior was unacceptable for someone serving the crown prince. Ilsa bluntly asks if she should take care of him, making Thomas panic. Ludwig then states that the blame also falls on everyone who encouraged and supported the false accusations. Ludwig decides that Thomas's punishment will not be determined by him, but by the Baldoberg Empire's court. He says he will leave the entire case in the hands of justice, explaining that the trial will be confidential and nothing will reach the public, not even the Kingdom of Belga. This means any testimony given will remain within the court. Meanwhile, he thinks Thomas might face trial, but the other students will likely only receive a warning. Ophelia comments on the different types of attendants, citing Ilse, Clarice, and also Thomas, telling everyone to pay close attention to what happens to each of them after the night of the ball. Meanwhile, Ludwig remains silent, observing the crowd and feeling the tension in the air. Ludwig watches silently as Sophia smiles at him. Ophelia announces she will be leaving Ludwig intrigued. Clarice shouts Ludwig's name, saying she has finally seen his true self, and asks if this was always Ophelia's plan, to which Ophelia only gives a mysterious reply. Then Ophelia walks away confidently, while Ludwig thinks that, for a heroine so focused on physical strength, she can be incredibly impressive at times. During lunch, a girl tries to convince the boy to join a training session, but he refuses. Sitting in the cafeteria, he notices that even another classmate is acting cold toward him. Irritated at not being able to eat in peace, he overhears comments about his relationship with the so-called frenzied night princess, who, behind her intimidating image, is also clumsy, making for a curious combination. A girl invites the boy to go out alone with her in the city, but the approach draws attention and provokes the reaction of another, who tells him to stay away from the saint. The tension rises, but a third person tries to calm the situation. Meanwhile, one of the girls asks the prince if she should get rid of the nuisances, and he comments that both of them are being too harsh with him that day. The girl explains that the church will hold a soup kitchen in the poor neighborhoods and asks if the prince would help. He considers that, as the heir to the empire, it would be inappropriate to refuse and agrees to contribute. Grateful, she smiles, while he says it will be an honor to help for the sake of the empire. In the village, volunteers organize a line to distribute food, ensuring there is enough for everyone. The prince helps with the distribution but shows nervousness when serving a man, thanking him with a trembling voice for waiting. The prince thinks about the people's suffering, caused by the empire's shift toward militarism. Although the impact is not yet fully visible, he knows that sooner or later the burden will fall on ordinary citizens. Determined to avoid a tragic fate, he thinks about seeking a better future, while his companion believes he could guide the nation down a more positive path. The prince feels that, thanks to Ophelia's encouragement and the vision the saint gave him about the empire's situation, perhaps he can make a difference. Acknowledging that he owes much to the two, he is suddenly approached by a soldier who grabs him and asks him to come along, leaving him surprised. The soldier accuses the prince of being a regicide, but he denies it and says he is busy distributing soup. Ignoring the refusal, the soldier orders him to go to the west wall after the event ends. Confused, the prince comments to Ophelia, finding the man's behavior strange. The prince is taken to a secluded location, accompanied by Ilsa, who insists on not leaving him alone. Upon arrival, he finds the soldier waiting and questions the reason for the meeting. The man bluntly says the matter is about the saint, maintaining a rude stance that annoys the prince. The soldier warns the prince to stay away from the saint, explaining that she has the divine mission of guiding nations and belongs to a powerful church with influence greater than that of many countries. He implies that the prince's presence could taint her authority, but Ludwig replies that the decision is up to the saint herself and that he has no intention of leaving her side. After hearing the soldier, the prince decides to end the conversation and leave, reflecting that, after the soup kitchen, he might need to reconsider his opinion of the saint. As he walks away, the man shouts at him not to forget that he will never accept the horrible orc, stressing that the saint is the reincarnation of a deity destined to save the world. The prince meets Marco, who reveals he overheard the conversation and is surprised that he does not want to distance himself from the saint. After a brief exchange, Ilse suggests they leave. Walking together, the prince reflects that he thought Marco was also against this closeness, and thanks Ilse for her help that day. The prince thinks that simple gestures help avoid a tragic fate, and feels he needs to thank her properly. Ilse responds that supporting him is simply her duty. He then says he will help with the cleanup, and asks her to wait at the spot. The saint approaches the prince, apologizing for interrupting him and thanking him for his help with the soup kitchen. She also expresses surprise that the Empire provided blankets and other supplies, something she did not expect. The prince finds her attitude unusual, as she normally acts more straightforwardly, even in tense situations. The saint praises the prince, but he says he sees no reason for it, considering it shameful that they only got involved thanks to the church's initiative. He comments that, in other Western countries, actions like the soup kitchen are common, but are usually the exclusive responsibility of the church. He then suggests they sit down to continue the conversation. Seated, the saint thanks him and says he is nothing like the rumors. She apologizes for Batista's rude behavior earlier. Remembering his etiquette lessons, the prince responds politely and accepts the apology. Surprised and concerned, the prince defends the saint, saying she did nothing wrong and asking them not to blame her. Natalia, moved, looks at him upon hearing his words. The prince says he does not intend to distance himself from her and asks if he could be invited again to help in the future. The saint, touched, agrees with a smile, and the two shake hands, reaffirming that they will count on each other next time. The saint looks closely at the prince and asks about his true intentions, mentioning rumors that depict him as a monster capable of destroying the world and dishonoring women. Surprised and nervous, he vehemently denies it, saying he would never do such a thing. After hearing the prince's reply, the saint says she believes him. As she releases his hand, he notices the impressive strength of her grip and thinks about how both she and Ilse possess unusual strength, even without being fighters. A month later, the prince wonders how the saint is doing. He learns that, at the request of the Holy Church of Minerva, she went to the kingdom of Borgonia to treat an unknown disease. Even as a healing specialist, the situation is complicated, as magic can also strengthen bacteria and viruses. Despite this, his companions believe that Natalia is helping many people and tell him not to worry. While talking, the prince and his companions agree that all they can do is pray for the saint's safety and welcome her with a smile when she returns. 2 weeks later, they receive a letter stating that Natalia has fallen ill, leaving everyone shocked and worried. The news reveals that the disease has not yet been identified and that the number of patients is increasing daily. The saint is bedridden, suffering from a high fever day and night, and her life is in danger. A request for help is sent to the Empire and the United Kingdom of Bryn. Faced with this, Ilse asks the prince what he will do. While he worries about Natalia, the prince reflects on Natalia, recognizing that, although she is seen as manipulative and does not get along with Ilse, she works hard to fulfill her role. He admits that he cannot hate her and decides to use all the knowledge from his past life to help. Determined, he says he will go to the kingdom of Borgonia to find out the truth and ensure he can save her. Ilse worries about the prince's idea of going to Borgonia, but he says he must confirm the situation personally, as Marco did not clearly explain the type of help needed. He refuses to let her go alone, stating that acting without thinking would be a waste of time, and that he does not want to put her in danger. Ophelia observes and comments that this is Prince Ludwig's way. The prince suggests using a magic portal to travel quickly to Borgonia, but Ophelia explains that they only exist in allied nations' capitals and require formal diplomatic ties. He then proposes using Bryn as an intermediary if the Empire has no direct connection, and Ophelia confirms that this is possible. The prince asks Ilse to handle the portal registration, and she agrees. Ophelia offers to accompany him to Borgonia, and Clarice is also called for the mission, confirming her participation. Ophelia and the prince exchange a fist bump, showing their mutual understanding. The group decides to set out for the kingdom of Borogonia. Ophelia explains that there are portals in the palace and the Foreign Affairs Ministry, but that she requested the use of the palace portal this time, as it could streamline the process and reduce the number of responsible parties if something went wrong. She warns that if they brought back an unknown disease, the entire capital could be at risk. The group arrives at the royal portal, and Ilsa confirms that the mana connection is complete, with only the necessary energy for the jump remaining. Although only citizens can use it, they decide to ignore this rule. The prince, intrigued, wonders if this situation was part of the plot or setting of The Horrible Orc. With the mana core installed and charged, the prince gives thanks and decides not to worry about other matters for now. Determined, he departs with his companions through the portal, promising himself that he will reach and save Saint Natalia. Saint Natalia lies in bed, sweating and with marks on her body, clearly weakened by the disease. The group, led by Prince Ludwig and Princess Ophelia, arrives at the room where she is being treated, greeted by someone calling them by name. The group is informed that Natalia is in critical condition and that Batista has also been infected by the same disease, bedridden in another room. Upon seeing Natalia, they notice that parts of her body appear to be turning to stone. The man who received them suggests they leave so he can explain the situation in more detail. They learn that the disease slowly petrifies the skin until it causes death, and that, in the last 2 months, the number of infected has increased to the point that almost the entire city is contaminated. If it reached the capital, it would mean the end of the country. While Marco leaves to care for Batista, something falls from his pocket, a stone that catches the prince's attention. The prince calls out to Marco, who smiles enigmatically. He asks to see the saint once more, and although he says he would rather refuse, Marco ends up allowing it. Ilse tries to stop him, worried, but Ludwig assures her it is fine and approaches Natalia. Natalia, weakened, apologizes for her appearance and calls for Prince Ludwig. He recognizes the scene, remembering the game, where, after being exiled and broken, the saint considered herself just an ordinary, worthless woman. In the original plot, she was never saved, ultimately surrendering her soul to the demon Diabolo after being crushed by the weight of the title she received when she was discovered and elevated from a farmer's daughter to the position of saint. The prince tells Natalia she is not pathetic and reminds her that she has always worked hard as a saint, risking everything to help Borogonia. He says they came to help her, not just for her title, but for who she is as a person. Holding her hand, he promises to save the country in her place and asks her to entrust the rest to them, receiving an emotional okay in response. Upon leaving the inn, the prince says they must wash immediately and asks Ophelia and Clarice to stay calm and listen. He reveals that what is affecting the people is not a disease, but something caused by the stone dragon's mana core. The prince remembers that in the game there were several types of negative status effects, and petrification was one of them. Although he makes up an excuse, claiming he read about it in the royal archives, he knows the item truly exists. He explains that if used during an invasion, the stone dragon's mana core would give the user a great advantage. In the original game, this item was added as a mechanic to make life easier for players due to the high difficulty level. The protagonist explains that, by placing the stone dragon's mana core in the city's water source, the water becomes infused with corrupted mana, turning people into stone. He states that this is not a mysterious disease, but rather a deliberate attack to destroy the city. Clara says that petrified people can be saved using a magic stone that absorbs mana, sold by merchants who trade with the Empire. However, the protagonist worries whether it will be possible to obtain enough to cure all those affected. The protagonist states that they must do everything in their power to save the city. He sets the plan: obtain mana-absorbing stones, and then find the stone dragon's mana core. His companions agree with determination, ready to act immediately. The protagonist explains that without the king's cooperation, there is no way to acquire so many mana-absorbing stones. But he believes Ophelia is already negotiating with her father, the King of Bryn. He argues that diplomacy favors alliances with distant nations, and that if the Empire helps now, they will gain long-term benefits. The protagonist secures Emperor Otto's approval and celebrates the success. As he leaves, he gives thanks and remarks that things went well on his side. When asked if they should inform the Kingdom of Borgonia or the Holy Church of Minerva, he replies that it is still too soon. While walking with his companion, the protagonist comments that they still don't know who placed the stone dragon's mana core and fears that, if the culprit finds out, they might flee. He explains that obtaining mana-absorbing stones is not difficult, but gathering enough to save the entire city will take time. With the Empire and the Kingdom of Bryn involved, they will have more resources. The young woman reminds him that even the Holy Church of Minerva gave up on Borgonia, but he was the only one to extend a helping hand. Holding his hand, she tells him he doesn't have to bear the burden alone. Ilsa looks firmly at the prince and says she has seen his determination with her own eyes. She then declares that she feels great pride in being able to serve him, showing respect and loyalty for what he represents. The prince confidently declares that he will save Polga and make those responsible pay for what they've done. He hands Ilsa a mana-absorbing stone, explaining that if the saint holds it in her mouth, the petrification will be cured. He then asks Ilsa to carry out this important task, and she promptly accepts. The prince tells Ilsa to infiltrate the clinic without attracting the attention of Marco and Batista, entrusting her with the stone that can save the saint. He states that he can only entrust this mission to her, and Ilsa, confident, immediately accepts the responsibility. The prince affirms that Ilsa will always be his only attendant, now and forever. Moved, she promises to remain by his side. Shortly after, he turns to his other two companions and asks for their help with another task, receiving a confident and positive response from them. The group arrives at a lake, and the prince explains that Polga gets its water from there, suspecting that the stone dragon's mana core is hidden in the area. Claris confirms the suspicion but worries about the risk of everyone turning to stone. The prince, confident, reveals that he brought several mana-absorbing stones, allowing him to dive repeatedly in search of it. The warrior warns that entering the lake's most infected area is suicide, even with mana-absorbing stones. The prince, however, assures there is no need for concern, revealing that he can hold his breath for 5 minutes, thanks to survival training against sea monsters. He explains that he cannot float, making him ideal for exploring the lake's bottom, and declares that, despite appearing slimmer, he still weighs 500 kilos due to his orc form. The prince explains that his survival will depend on the two companions, asking them to watch over the safety rope while he dives. He reveals that he sent Ilsa on another mission to keep her away. The warriors agree to help, and he instructs that if he runs out of air or finds the stone dragon's mana core, he will tug the rope as a signal. Ophelia firmly declares that she will never let Prince Ludwig die, and if that happens, she will follow him to death, leaving him uncomfortable with the statement. Before diving, Ludwig receives words of encouragement and concern from his companions, who tell him to be careful and wish him good luck. Ludwig dives into the lake, tied to a rope, realizing the place is larger and darker than he imagined. Even with the mana-absorbing stones, he feels the petrification, advancing rapidly, and wonders what would happen if he touched the core directly. Identifying the area where the petrification is strongest, he concludes that the stone dragon's mana core is there. Ludwig realizes there is no time to hesitate and keeps advancing, even as the petrification spreads. Soon, he spots a bright, powerful sphere at the bottom of the lake, immediately recognizing it as the stone dragon's mana core. Ludwig feels his body being quickly petrified, realizing that the magic stones are not managing to hold back the curse. Determined, he comes up with an idea and decides to act immediately, convinced that his plan will work as he continues moving toward the core. Ludwig grabs the stone dragon's core, triggering a strong glow as the water around him churns. With his goal achieved, he tugs the rope as a signal, hoping to be pulled up quickly before the petrification advances further. Ophelia and Claris pull Ludwig out of the water, concerned for his condition. He holds the stone dragon's core, claiming he won the bet. Claris rushes to give him all the mana-absorbing stones, but the petrification has advanced so much that even his voice is being affected. Now covered head to toe with mana-absorbing stones, Ludwig begins to regain movement. Even so, he remarks that the amount Ophelia used is excessive, while she and Claris still surround him with worry. Ludwig hugs Ophelia tightly, saying he was truly worried about her and apologizing. Claris watches the scene, while in the background, a woman approaches, calling for the prince. Ludwig grows nervous when he sees Ilsa returning at that very moment, wondering if she tracked him with some kind of clairvoyance. Upon seeing him, Ilsa runs over in concern and asks what happened to him. Ilse hugs Ludwig tightly, calling him prince, and beginning to cry. Ophelia explains that he dove alone to retrieve the stone dragon's mana core, leaving Ludwig embarrassed. Crying, Ilse asks if he really wants to make her this sad every time. Ilse weeps, asking Ludwig never to do something so dangerous again. He comforts her, promising that he won't worry her like that again. Under the moonlight, Ludwig apologizes once more. Ilse declares that she will never leave Ludwig's side again. He laughs, asking if she is okay, but she scolds him to take care of himself before worrying about others. He agrees, finding it fair. Ilse informs him that the saint has already completely recovered and asks Ludwig what he will do next. He declares that he will make the culprits pay with a death full of pain. Ilse agrees, saying they must pay, while Ludwig promises not to act recklessly. Ophelia asks if Ludwig already has a suspect. He says he doesn't know exactly who is behind it, but has a strong idea. Upon hearing this, Ophelia calls Clarice to act, and she promptly responds. Ophelia declares that she will personally defeat the culprit. While Clarice comments that this enemy messed with the wrong person, Ludwig is surprised to see her, and Ilse calls him seriously. In the middle of the forest, Marco appears before the group. Ludwig asks why he is there and remarks that he should be looking after the saint. Marco, with a confident smile, asks when Ludwig realized the truth. Ophelia recalls that he is a holy knight of the church and protector of the saint. Ludwig explains that the petrification core's energy affected the entire city, reaching even the saint, but sparing Marco, which he finds very suspicious. He reveals that the true culprit is the Holy Church of Minerva. Ophelia, surprised, questions why the church would do something like this to the kingdom of Borgonia. Ludwig explains that, in the game's story, the Church of Minerva is involved in the saint's plot, and that her presence was seen as a threat by some. He reveals that Saint Natalia respects Pope Agrimazione more, and his greatest opponent is Cardinal Lorenzo Rudolfo Maldini of the Church of Minerva. Ludwig explains that for Cardinal Lorenzo, who desires total control of the church, the saint aligned with the Pope and loved by the people is merely an obstacle. He states that soon they will obtain the full truth directly from him, already imprisoned in Borgonia, as the group prepares to act. During the confrontation, Batista attacks Ludwig furiously, accusing him of siding with the saint's enemies. He questions if everything Ludwig said at the soup kitchen was a lie, and blames him for changing the saint. During the fight, Batista shouts angrily, saying he saw the saint in a shameful scene with a demon, claiming she would never have done something like that before meeting Ludwig. The prince, confused and irritated, demands to know what he is talking about. Ludwig provokes Batista about his accusations, questioning if he was spying on the saint. Batista justifies himself by saying that, as her protector, he watches her at all times as part of his duty. But Ludwig points out that this seems more like stalking than protection. Marco orders Batista to retreat, ending the confrontation. Batista, irritated, promises that next time will be the end of Ludwig and insults him before leaving with Marco. Ophelia tries to stop Ludwig from letting the enemies escape, but he orders not to pursue them. He states that they already know who is behind it, and that by reporting to the Kingdom of Borgonia and the Church of Minerva, the situation should be resolved. He then concludes that this is enough. The saint appears, and Ophelia is surprised to see her there. She explains that she was present at Ludwig's request, as he did not want to leave her alone with a stalker. Ludwig asks how she is feeling. The saint says she is fine, and thanks Ludwig for the magic stone that helped her fully recover. She comments on Batista's false accusations, saying it is understandable for him to react that way as a devoted follower. Then, with a saddened look, she says she believes Ludwig must also be disappointed in her. Ludwig responds that there is no reason to be disappointed in her, saying that it does not matter whether she worships a god or a demon. For him, what matters is that she is Natalia Silvestri, and that is enough. He states that a person's worth is not defined by what they worship, moving the saint to tears as she hugs him. Ludwig smiles and says they should go punish the culprits with force, ensuring that both the goddess Minerva and the demon Diavolo judge them. Natalia is moved and praises Ludwig, saying he is truly special. They share a moment of closeness, while their companions in the background watch the scene with varied reaction. In the Kingdom of Borgonia, while waiting in the antechamber before the audience with the king, one of the companions asks if the monarch will accept the request to save Polga. Upon hearing that Ludwig will make the request, she becomes confident. Natalia, sitting beside him, focuses more on the snacks, praising their flavor while leaning too close, leaving Ludwig slightly embarrassed. She says it's fine since they are alone there. While Natalia clings affectionately to Ludwig, he, flustered, asks Ilse to intervene, but she ignores him, turning her head away. Ludwig feels disappointed by her reaction. The atmosphere in the room becomes heavy, and while they wait to be called by the king, one companion offers to check the delay, while another sighs, noting they have yet to be summoned. The group is informed that preparations are complete and are invited to proceed to the Hall of Mist. There, they are received by King Dinis of Borgonia, who greets Prince Ludwig, Princess Ophelia, and the saint. Ludwig responds respectfully, saying it is an honor to have an audience with His Majesty, and prepares to reveal the truth. Ludwig explains to the king that they themselves sealed the dangerous magic core of the stone dragon, but that the stolen magic stones are already being transported by the Empire and by Brünn. He implores the king to make the decision to save his people. The saint reinforces the request, saying she wants her efforts to be rewarded. Although he knows it is not their obligation, Ludwig says he chose to try to help. Minister Ricardo explains to the king that they investigated the origin of the mysterious disease and discovered it was caused by the Holy Church of Minerva. He claims that the Pope's faction orchestrated the entire tragedy to then pose as saviors, gaining new followers and power. Ludwig and the others are shocked, realizing the crisis was fabricated. The minister also notes that the Empire likely facilitated the transport of the stone dragon's core, something difficult to import. Ludwig is outraged and accuses the minister of lying, saying that his and the saint's presence should be proof enough against the false allegations. The minister mocks him, calling Ludwig the horrible orc, and insinuating that even the kingdom of Brünn might be supporting the supposed scheme. Ophelia reacts furiously, but the king interrupts, ordering them to stop. The king declares that there is no reason to continue the discussion, as the cause of the crisis has already been eliminated by Ludwig's group. He states that the duty now is clear: deliver the mana-absorbing stones to save the people of Polga. Determined, he orders the distribution to begin immediately, without waiting for support from other kingdoms, stressing that no more time should be lost. Guards and a man begin laughing, but Ludwig maintains a confident smile. The scene then shifts to a corridor, where Ilsa runs happily to him, celebrating and saying he succeeded, as the group walks away together. The group moves quickly through the corridors, commenting that King Dinis proved to be a good ruler who cares about his people. They discuss the traitors, but agree that the Cardinal's faction will hardly admit guilt. Ludwig states that they already have the stone dragon's core, and that this will reveal who was behind the plan, as he receives a warm thank you from Ilse. Thanks to King Dinis' swift orders, the mana-absorbing stones were distributed, starting with the most severe petrification cases. The Empire also secured a large supply and was ready to transport the rest. With that, Polga was saved from disaster, and everyone acknowledged Prince Louis's merit. Meanwhile, guards march, clearing the way for the entourage. Minister Ricardo appears with guards, calling Natalia a criminal and accusing her of plunging Polga into chaos. He officially announces that she is under arrest, shocking everyone in the group. Ricardo orders the saint's arrest, but Ludwig steps in front and says he will not allow it. He questions whether the minister is ignoring the king's order to prioritize saving Polga, while Ricardo provokes him, calling him naive. Natalia realizes they are trying to place all the blame on her. Ludwig suspects that Ricardo and the Cardinal's faction have been involved from the start. He orders Ilsa and Clarice to take the saint to the king, while he and Ophelia handle the situation. Despite her concern, Ilsa accepts the order. Ludwig assures that everything is under control, saying he has Princess Ophelia at his side and that he is good at defense. As the group splits up, he and Ophelia prepare to face the soldiers, and Ophelia charges in using her Stormbreaker technique. Ludwig and Ophelia fight together against the enemies, with Ophelia using a powerful attack to clear a path. In the midst of battle, Ludwig is surprised by an opponent who reveals himself to be behind it all and threatens to make the saint pay as well. Ludwig confronts him angrily but ends up vulnerable, and Ophelia notices the danger while asking if he is okay. A knight switches sides in the middle of battle, taking down enemy soldiers with a quick strike. He apologizes and says he decided to change sides, surprising the opponent. He then lands a precise blow, leaving the enemy furious and shouting his name in anger. Marco reveals that he has been on their side from the start, surprising everyone. While some enemies fall, it is explained that he pretended to be relaxed, but was actually protecting the saint and eliminating threats. Even with his help, the group is still surrounded, and the opponents call him a traitor, promising revenge. As the battle continues, Ilsa appears running and calls out to Prince Louis, announcing that reinforcements have arrived. With a confident smile, she assures that there is nothing to worry about. Right behind her, allies march in and confirm they managed to arrive in time to help. The situation completely changes when the supreme leader of the Holy Church of Minerva, Agrietta Menzione, appears. She says she heard everything and questions Ricardo for trying to blame Natalia, revealing that she brought proof of her innocence. With a calm tone, she suggests they talk peacefully, leaving Ricardo visibly uncomfortable. The leader of the church speaks with Prince Ludwig, mentioning that Natalia always speaks well of him. She then reveals that she captured those responsible for tarnishing the name of the Church of Minerva and turns to Cardinal Lorenzo, asking him to explain himself. With everyone present, she proposes to clarify the situation, leaving the cardinal surprised and nervous. The leader of the church taunts the cardinal, asking if he is ashamed to speak, and says she will expose his crimes. She begins by revealing that the stone dragon cores were acquired from the kingdom of Belga, homeland of Sophia, indicating suspicious ties between Lorenzo and them. At that moment, King Dinis appears alongside the leader, stating that he will explain the entire connection. King Dinis reveals that his mother, the third queen of the former king of Borgonia, was royalty from Belga, and that he became king thanks to the support of several nobles, including Ricardo. The leader of the church adds that Lorenzo and Ricardo were very close, showing letters found on Lorenzo's property. With this, the king orders Ricardo to be arrested and taken to the capital, accusing him of causing suffering to the people of Polga. Ricardo tries to defend himself, claiming it is all a conspiracy and accusing the church of colluding with Baldebek.